Once again, thank you so much for joining our webinar. As you've heard me say time and time again, the Rebbe had a dream, and the dream was that Mashiach will come. And when Mashiach comes, there'll be no more war and no more suffering, no more pandemics, no more load shedding. I hear there's load shedding tonight in Glen Hazel and Houghton. There'll be a world where godliness will be absolutely revealed. In order to achieve this, the Rebbe sent emissaries throughout the world. I imagine one of the more challenging places is Hawaii. And this evening we have Rabbi Krasnjansky, who is the head shliach in Hawaii. Together with his wife Pearl, they built up the most amazing institutions there. But it's also a very relevant week for everybody because of the American election, and what happens in America affects us all and affects Israel. So Rabbi Krasnjansky is going to take us on a journey. So Rabbi Krasnjansky, first of all, I want to thank you for making the time. It's 7 o'clock in the morning for you. And we very much appreciate you making the time. And we do go back. We were in yeshiva together. So thank you for doing this.
My pleasure. And if that's what it takes for us to reconnect, then that's what it is. But no, it's really my pleasure. And it's a wonderful thing that you're doing. And I'd love to share with everyone, a little about Hawaii and our shlichus in Hawaii, our mission in Hawaii, and a little of what's going on today in America and around the world. So just a very general overview. In 1987, in August of 1987, myself and Pearl, and at that time, we had 2 little babies. We moved to Hawaii. We received the blessing, the bracha of the Rebbe, to come to Hawaii and to open up Chabad in Hawaii. We've been here ever since. And today, Hawaii, thank God, we have Chabad houses on there are 4 main islands in the state of Hawaii. Today we have Chabad houses on all the 4 islands, and actually one of them, the island of Kauai, is the rabbi is a fellow South African, Rabbi Michael Goldman, Rabbi Yossi Goldman's son, who's doing a fantastic job on the island of Kauai. So Jewish people came to Hawaii. Really, it started during World War II. When a lot of soldiers were passing by Hawaii to go to the Pacific Islands, and some of them fell in love with Hawaii, and from that, pretty much the Jewish community began to develop. And today we have a local Jewish community, which is not that big. There's maybe 10 to 15,000 Jews spread out throughout the 4 islands. We are shluchim in Honolulu. It's called the island of Oahu. It's the largest island. And then there's an island called Maui, a very beautiful island. All the islands are very nice. Hawaii is known for its beauty. And then there's the island of Kauai. In Maui, our son is a shliach there, Rabbi Krasnjansky, and in Kauai, Rabbi Goldman, and on the Big Island is Rabbi Levi Garlitsky and his wife, and all are doing the work of reaching out to the Jews that live there. In addition to the local community, there's also the military community, because Hawaii has a very large military presence. Pearl Harbor, which is what dragged America into World War II when it was bombed by the Japanese, is a very big naval base. And the chapel there, called a Lower Jewish Chapel. And so you have Jewish military people. There's also an Air Force base. And Chabad interacts with many of the military people here. As well as we have a very large tourist industry in Hawaii. Hawaii lives on tourism, and at any given time, there's many uh, Jewish tourists as well who here. And Chabad did in a place called Waikiki Beach, which is the main area of all the tourists. So on any given Shabbos or any given day, we have many tourists that are here. Right now, with the pandemic, Hawaii has been shut down to tourists. All the hotels have been shut down for over half a year now. Just last week, they opened it up again with requirements that if in order to come, you have to get tested and you have to be negative. So it's slowly starting to open up again. But usually on Shabbos, at our Shabbos table at the Chabad house, we can have anywhere from 10 to 100 tourists from all over the world. So that's a very exciting part of our shlichus for many of these tourists, even though a lot of them are Orthodox and religious. It's really, for many of them, the first time that they're in a Chabad house. And it's a very interesting experience for them, usually very uplifting and inspiring. And as well, we have the Israeli community. We have, over the last 5 to 10 years, many Israelis have moved here. And we have a large contingency of Israelis, and they all, all come to Chabad. So that's generally the demographics of the community, the Jewish community in Hawaii. Just want to say that over the years, there were two political figures in Hawaii, the state of Hawaii, that one was Jewish, our governor of Hawaii, about 5 years ago, or a little more, 8 years ago. Her name is Lingle, a Jewish woman. But before her, there was a senator. In the United States, each state has 2 senators. So in Hawaii, there was a long time serving senator. His name was Daniel Inouye, who wasn't Jewish. He was from Hawaii, but he was one of the most prominent senators in the Senate. He was one of the longest serving senators. And he also was one of the most powerful senators in the fact that he controlled a lot of the important committees in Washington, specifically the Committee for the Foreign Aid and the Military Aid. And he was an unbelievable friend of the Jewish people, tremendous Ohev Yisrael. He loved the Jewish people. And he was the staunchest supporter of the state of Israel in the Senate. And he was a very fascinating person. I had he passed away also about 10 years ago. I had the privilege to know him very well. We were very close. And his personal story is a very fascinating story. He served in the what is called the 442nd of the brigade that liberated Jews from the camps. Later on, he was in the Korean War, and he got wounded, and he was in a hospital for a year, rehabilitating from his wounds. He lost an arm, and next to him in the hospital bed was another soldier who was wounded and recuperating, and he was a Jewish person, and they became friends, and they were talking, and a lot of what they were talking about was the Holocaust. And this Jewish soldier was telling him about the horrors of the Holocaust, how he lost so much of his family. And it intrigued the senator. He couldn't understand, because all of what he read was how much the Jewish people contributed to all the societies that they lived in. And here there was this Holocaust and anti-Semitism. So he was very taken by it, and he began to really delve into it. And he learned, to his horror, that anti-Semitism could be traced all the way back to the church, to the origins of Christianity. And he became affected by that. At some point, he wanted to convert to Judaism because he felt that the injustice of what's happening to the Jewish people. At the end, his mother convinced him not to convert, and he went to see a rabbi. And at that time, he was in Washington, D.C., going to law school. He went to see a rabbi, and it was a Reform rabbi, and the Reform rabbi did what all rabbis should do, is dissuade him from becoming Jewish. So he never became Jewish, but he was always a lifelong friend of the Jews. And in his office, he showed me many times with great pride all of the Judaica things that he was gifted by prime ministers of Israel. He even had a mezuzah on his office and a menorah. It was a very, very fascinating person. And he was the most influential political person in the history of the state of Hawaii. The other person, I'll make it short, is Governor Lingle, a Jewish woman who was actually a Republican. Hawaii is a very democratic state, but against all odds, she won and became the governor. And we became friends even before she was elected. And I would have a shiur with her, a Torah class with her once a week in the governor's mansion. We'd learn the parsha of the week with the Rebbe's thoughts on it, as well as she opened up the governor's mansion to have Pesach Seders there. And every year, my wife would put together a big, large Pesach Seder, and we would invite many of the prominent people from the state would come, and she would be hosted. It was a really wonderful experience. She became very close to Yiddishkeit. When we first met her, she was Jewish, but not really connected to her Judaism. And eventually she became Shomer Shabbos, which she is today. She's no longer in politics, but she's a very connected Jew. So this is just a little insight of life, Jewish life in Hawaii. Just want to say, the rabbi mentioned, what's going on in the world now, the pandemic, and how it affected all of us. And we Jews always look to find the silver lining in everything that's happening, even catastrophes. And this is surely a catastrophe, but it's Hashem talking to us, sending us, giving us some messages. And there's an interesting parable. It's explained that there was some parents who wanted to show their young child the beautiful, majestic sky of the evening, of the night, with all the stars. So he took the child outside at night, and they pointed to the heavens for the child to look at the stars. It was a beautiful starlit sky. But there was this young boy, being very, very young, didn't understand and was fixated on the finger, the parents, the father's and mother's finger, where they were pointing to the heavens. He didn't look at the heavens, he was just looking at the finger. In the same way, Hashem sends us pointers from time to time, in the hopes that we, will look up and understand what's happening. Very often we get fixated on the finger on what's happening without realizing that this is a message for us. So whatever the message is, it's definitely ultimately going to lead to something more positive. It's like someone said, it's as if the whole world shut down for renovations. I know that in America, I don't know how it is in South Africa, but very often you'll see a store or a mall that it says we're closed for renovations. So it's clearly that Hashem is ushering in the final renovated world that was promised to us with the coming of Mashiach, as well as all the hard work of Torah and mitzvahs that the Jewish people have done throughout the generations. And now this is the final push as the Rebbe said, if we open our eyes, we see that Mashiach is coming, that Mashiach is actually here. So in that sense, these are very, very special times. We just read in this week's Torah portion, Parshas Lech Lecha, last week's, the story of the first Jew, Avram Avinu, whose mission was to call upon Vayikra Sham b'Shem Hashem Keil Elam, to call upon God, the Master of the world, and not only for himself, for his own personal relationship with Hashem, but Vayakri, he actually taught people and brought awareness of Hashem into the world, as we know. So Abraham began the journey. He was the first one to be called upon by Hashem on this long journey, Lech Lecha Ma'artzecha. We today, our generation, as the Rebbe pointed out, this is the final stop. This is the very end of that long journey. And while Avram began the effort, it is up to us, each and every one of us, to bring it to the finish line. And the Rebbe explained that when we see Hashem's hand in everything, when we recognize that this is God's world and everything that's happening in this world is for us to recognize Hashem and to bring Hashem into our lives and into this world and make this world a godly place, then we are doing what Avraham Avinu began, and we are the lucky ones, and we are at the very, very final stretch of this journey. So we can only speculate, but it seems to me that this pandemic is really tore down at all of the false gods that people have been living with. All of the secular life as it's lived in the Western world pretty much has all been stripped away. You cannot do the things that you travel, partying, going out and with friends. All of those things have been curtailed. And I think that this is an opportunity, it's definitely to go more inward, to reflect and to realize the important things of life are not the life that we live on the outside, but it's more importantly, it's life on the inside, our neshamas, our souls, our families. And with strengthening that, when we starting to go out into the world again, it'll be with a much stronger impact. And this is the whole idea of living with Mashiach, as Rebbe talked about. These are some thoughts. I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in or ask or anything specific, but I can share a lot of interesting stories with encounters we've had here in Hawaii. So,
just to interrupt it there, firstly, what's the how many Jews live in Hawaii, and what's the assimilation rate?
So, like I said, there's about, if I had to guess, like 15,000 Jews live in Hawaii. And I say guess because it's a very, very unstructured community. You probably cannot even say community. Most of the Jews are not affiliated. And unfortunately, assimilation is very, very high. If we find a family that both husband and wife are Jewish, it's like a treasure. So that's a big problem here. Intermarriage is very high. But there's a lot of good Jews here, and we connect, and they connect to Chabad and to Judaism, and that's really our shlichus here, our mission here.
So we would love to hear one or two stories that's taken place there.
So I'll tell you two stories. One I'll tell you from our early years on Shlichus here when we came to Hawaii. When we came here, we were told by people that we met that you have to meet this gentleman. His name is Mr. Tsur, Jacob Tsur. He was originally an Israeli, but he's been living in the States for many years. And he was a big macher here, a very wealthy man, and involved in the Jewish community. He was like a leader in the Jewish community, and we should meet with him, and he can definitely be of help to Chabad. So eventually I got an appointment to meet with him. And the first thing he said to me when we met was, he said the yarmulke and the payas is something that we did in the old country, in Europe. But today, that's not Judaism today. And it began a very interesting conversation. And he was secular Israeli, believed that the diaspora Jew and how we Jews lived in the diaspora with the mitzvahs is something that has been replaced with modern day Israel, and therefore that's really the only focus that Jews need is to support Israel, and it was going on and on and on. And even though that clearly his head was in a different place, he had one interesting thing is that he liked to study Chumash. He liked to study Torah. And he actually would get together and invite people to his home and teach Chumash. He didn't teach it the traditional way. Didn't know the commentaries and everything, but he read into the Torah his ideas. So I said to him, I said, Yaakov, I know you like to study Torah. Why don't we get together and study once a week? I'll be happy to study with you. He says, yeah, that he would like. So we arranged to get together once a week, and I would come to his office and we would study. And the more we learned, the more he really enjoyed it and he took to it. To make a long story short, fast forward, he began to study very seriously, learn Torah, and we had more shiurim, until eventually he came around. He became from himself, religious himself, became one of Chabad's biggest supporters. And unfortunately, he passed away at a relatively young age, so he's no longer with us. But this was a very interesting turn of events that happened all because a Jew was open to learn Torah, and his neshama responded, and he made a 180-degree turn in his life, and became a very serious Jew. There's another interesting story. This is more recent. Is that many years ago, I got a call from a Jewish person that was traveling by. He wasn't from here, was living in Chicago, but he had a lot of business in Hawaii, so he was in Hawaii. And he called us up and he said that he's going to be in Hawaii over Shabbos, and his wife has yahrzeit, so she would like to come and say Kaddish. And he just called to ask if they can come. He was a conservative Jew. So I said, sure they can come. So they came, and this happened many years ago, so I don't remember if, his wife saying Kaddish, but they came, and something happened there in that afternoon, that morning that they came to Chabad, that something touched him very deeply, and we remained connected. And he would come back and forth, and he would start coming to Chabad whenever he came to Hawaii. And he was a very warm Jew, and he had a great love for Israel. And in the conservative shul that he was very active. And again, he started becoming closer to Yiddishkeit. He hooked up with Chabad in his city in Chicago, and became even more involved. And eventually, today, fast forward, he's not a young man, but he's a little elderly, maybe in his late 70s. And today he has a long white beard. Uh, his children and grandchildren are Lubavitcher Chassidim. He himself is a very wealthy man, and he supports excuse me, supports many Chabad houses around the country, in many of the places that his family does business. And it's all from just one interaction, one Shabbos that he spent in Chabad that led him on this fascinating journey. And when you call his office, they answer, at least when you catch him on the phone, he says, "Mashiach headquarters, what can I do for you?" That's a story about this friend of ours.
You've got a big week coming up in America, and as I said, what happens in America affects the entire world, and particularly Israel.
Correct.
You
And therefore,
get two
we're all
very
praying
different
very
versions,
hard.
like CNN or Fox. But please share with us your thoughts on both the presidency, the Senate, and Congress.
So in Shul the Shabbos, we were talking about to try to get a handle and understanding of the impossible mission that Avraham Avinu had when he began his journey, and said that imagine if you're a pro-Trumper in a room of radical leftists, democratic leftists. Imagine how awkward it is and how difficult it is to communicate with these people. So that's the situation today. Personally, I think I speak for most Jews that are that value Israel and Am Yisrael. That is really it's not a normal election where you can choose one way or the other, and there's some slight differences between this candidate and the other candidate. The difference today is so critical for the Jewish people. I'm not even going to go into the local American politics, why Trump is critical to keep America strong and strengthen America, but that's really politics, and people may differ, and I'm happy to talk about it, but that's politics. But as far as the Eretz Yisrael goes, as far as Jewish people go, Trump has been the greatest president that American Jews have ever had, and we've had some good presidents in the past. But no one holds a candle to Trump's support and advocacy for Israel and for Jewish people. So it's really critical for him to win. The Rebbe would not get involved in politics in Israel. The Rebbe would always make sure that Chabad is an apolitical group and can therefore speak to people of all political stripes. But when it came to an election in Israel with Shimon Peres, who wanted to give away territories in the false notion that would bring peace with the Palestinians, the Rebbe came out and said that everyone has to vote for the right-wing party. I think it was Shamir at the time. And it's not politics as usual, but it's really pikuach nefesh. The very security of Am Yisrael is at stake. And this is clearly, I believe, the situation today, that a vote for Trump is a vote for continued support for Eretz Yisrael. And we're seeing the domino effect of his support with these Arab countries who are now finally lining up to make peace with Israel without the terrible concessions that that the earlier peace negotiations would always involve. And it's really unprecedented. It's like mind-blowing. It's like Mashiach's times. And his support for Jews. I mean, we all know the story of Shalom Rubashkin, an individual, Chabad individual who was wrongly accused and imprisoned and faced an anti-Semitic judge, and his whole life was in peril. And Trump pardoned him. He was the only one that had the koyach, the strength to do the right thing. Things of that, moving the embassy to Israel, and all of these things show his deep connection and relationship and support of Jewish people. And what's lately have come out, I don't know if everyone has heard it, but it turns out that his father, who was a big real estate developer in New York, in Brooklyn, New York, helped many Jewish people who had come. He built the Trump Village. That was a whole series of housing in Brooklyn, New York. And a lot of the tenants were Jews from the old country that had just come from Europe. Many of them didn't have anything in terms no money, jobs. He would individually help people with jobs. He would allow for them to live in his apartments without paying rent until they were able to. He himself built the shul in that neighborhood. It wasn't Jewish. He just had a love for Jewish people, and that clearly has reached his son, our president. And we only really pray that he wins, and that we'll have another 4 years. And how beautiful it would be that he wins and Mashiach comes, and the important country of the U.S. would be in lockstep in support of all of that. So it's potentially very exciting. And I tell everyone, I tell the people that I know that you got to vote for Trump, but even the people that I don't know so well, I say you have to vote. Unfortunately, in Hawaii, we're a very democratic state. And the way the politics work in the United States, it goes by electoral votes. Every state has a certain amount of delegates. And the candidate that wins most of the electoral votes is the one, the president. There's two things. There's the popular vote and there's the electoral vote. And you could win the electoral vote and not win the popular vote. So Hawaii really, first of all, because of our time difference in the mainland, by the time people vote in Hawaii, the elections have been decided already. So it's really just an exercise in voting. But even though this year people vote early, with the pandemic, so people can mail in their votes and vote early, and I know many people have. I myself have done as well. And we're really pushing hard. A lot of people are really pushing hard. A lot of actually from people or Orthodox people on the mainland are going out very strong in support of Trump and encouraging everyone to vote for Trump. And locally, like I said, I don't want to get into politics, but liberal thinking is something that's an enigma to me. It doesn't make any sense, at least the radical liberal thinking, and how they, what's down they see as up, and what's up they see as down. What's good they see as bad. The Navi says, the prophet says that describing the symptoms of the exile, that what is bitter they say is sweet, and what's dark they say is light. And it seems an apt description for many people's thinking, many liberal people's thinking about these important issues. So, like I said, it's a big week. Like you said, it's a big week, and with Hashem's help. What's interesting, someone pointed out to me that the Torah portion of this week on Tuesday, the day when there's the U.S. election, is the portion of Hashem turning over the city of Sodom, Sodom and Gomorrah, Sodom va'Amorah, where Hashem says that this is a lot of bad stuff going on, and we have to turn it over. So we're hoping that the election will turn over what potentially could become a Sodom va'Amorah, Sodom and Gomorrah.
Ichel, I pick up between the lines. Just tell me if I'm right. I pick up that you're quite pro-Trump. I'm picking that up.
Between the lines, well, David, we always knew you're very smart, but
let me ask one thing.
Yeah.
Time is running, but just closing remarks. The predictions, and I'd like you to share with us this. the predictions of Mashiach is that the foes and the enemies of Israel will make peace with Israel and acknowledge that Israel belongs to the Jewish people. Why don't you just give us, because it is what's happened under the Trump rulership with the embassy moving to Yerushalayim and all this. This to me is what it says about the coming of Mashiach. So why don't you just give us how the coming of Mashiach is going to unfold, which is central to our religion, and we'll conclude with that.
Okay, well, I think, David, Rabbi, you just said it yourself, that, that there's the nations that are supporting Israel, that are making peace with Israel, not only in and of itself is a positive thing and is a fulfillment of prophecies of redemption, but also the ripple effect that has on other nations. And as we know, unfortunately, for too long, Israel has been ridiculed in the world body and the United Nations. Always everything is anti-Israel, and too many countries jump on that bandwagon. So slowly but surely, and this is also thanks to President Trump, where he put a stop to that in the UN and did not allow for Israel to get beat up without a strong response. So, it's clearly all of this that is unfolding is pointing towards what the Rebbe said with the coming of Mashiach. I'll just say something very, very interesting. The Rebbe instituted that we learn a Rambam every day. We learn a selected readings from the Rambam Maimonides. And the Rebbe once pointed out that the Maimonides, the Rambam begins his work, the Yad HaChazaka, with the words in Hebrew, Yesod HaYesodis V'Amud HaChochmas, the foundation of all foundations and the pillar of wisdom is to know that God exists, that there is a Motzei Rishon, that there is a primal being that brings everything into creation, into being. So the commentaries say, why did the Rambam begin with these words? Because in Hebrew, Yesod HaYesodis V'Amud HaChochmas, the first letters of each of these four words spell out Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, Yud Hei Vav Hei, Yesod HaYesodis V'Amud HaChochmas. In other words, the Rebbe said that the Rambam begins his book hinting to Hashem's presence, by choosing words that the first letters of these words spell out Hashem's name. That's the very beginning of the book. The very end of the book of the Rambam is Hilchos Malachim, the laws of kings, and the final chapter is about the laws of King Mashiach, about Mashiach. And the Rambam says that when Mashiach comes, there will be the fulfillment of the prophecy, Umola ha'oretz deyes Hashem kamayim layom mechasim, that the whole earth, the whole world will be filled with the knowledge of God like the waters cover the seabed. In other words, the very beginning of his book, only Hashem's name is only hinted, that it's there, that it exists, only in the form of a hint. But the very end, in the times of Mashiach, Hashem's presence will not only be a hint, but it'll be front and center. Everywhere you turn, you will see the presence of Hashem. And this is what we look around on the world today, as Rebbe pointed out, that today it's no longer a question, of whether God is real, or Torah mitzvahs for the Jew is real. Today we're at the stage where everywhere we turn, we see how Hashem's guiding hand shapes everything, and we see how with Torah and mitzvahs, how each and every one of us can bring the world a step closer to that realization. So this is where we're at now. The Rebbe once said that in the cosmic scheme of things, we know the world was created in 6 days, and then came Shabbos. Shabbos is representative of the Messianic times. It says when Mashiach comes, it will be a Yom Shekuli Shabbos, a day. It will be a Shabbos eternal, an eternal day of Shabbos. So we're now at 5,781, which means we're in the end of the 6th millennium. The 7th millennium is the millennium of Mashiach. So, for example, in Hawaii, I don't know how it is in South Africa, this week Shabbos came in at 5:45 p.m., 5:45. So in the cosmic calendar, we now are at the very end of the 6th millennium, which means we are like Friday Shabbos comes in 5:45 p.m. We're now Friday 5 p.m. or maybe 5:30 p.m. And there's only a couple of minutes left before the messianic, before the ultimate transformation of the world. And we all have to be part of that change, and really we drive that change. So this is a very, very exciting times. Okay.
Rabbi, it's 7:40. It's 7:40.
I'm sorry?
I say it's 7:42, and I was cruel to get you up. But thank you so much. I'm going to pass over to my son Aaron. He's going to thank you. But I just it was great getting back together.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Rabbi, keep up your good work. I hear wonderful things about what you do in South Africa. So keep it up, and we'll see each other in the line.
Thank you. You had two girls from South Africa, the Steiner girls, Gila and Tova. So
yes,
the mother's on the Zoom, and she just said how grateful she is to you. They had a great time with you.
Yeah, I remember they were good girls. Yes, I remember. We also had a girl, Kesselman. I think she's from South Africa too, years ago.
Rabbi Krasnjansky, thank you so much. We do appreciate it. And as many homes sitting in Johannesburg have been going through a bit of darkness, you brought a bit of light. So thank you. We do appreciate it. And hopefully you also continue your shlichus, your amazing work in Hawaii. And so thank you so much. And to all who joined in, we do appreciate it. And please join Rabbi Wagner as he gives an advanced course in Tanya. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.